Hello, and welcome to Astral Ring's Endgame series, where we discuss games in their endgame state and give you an idea of what to expect as far as time, investment, rewards, and retention. I'm your host, Anima Arson, and today we'll be doing a side-by-side look at two MMORPGs, Final Fantasy XIV and TERA Online. If you're new to both games, we'll give you a brief history of both.
Final Fantasy XIV is Square Enix's second subscription-based game with a glamour cash shop and one of the most popular flagship RPG series in the world. When the game was first launched in September 2010, it didn't live up to or succeed its predecessor Final Fantasy XI. So the game went free for those who owned it, then shut down temporarily to be redeveloped and launched in August 2013 into one of the most popular MMOs on the market today. The combat system is tab target with action-based dodging. The skills are on a global and off-global cooldown combo system while your character auto-attacks, giving the fights a paced rhythm, allowing the jobs to create a rotation to maximize DPS, healing, and support. Final Fantasy XIV is very story-driven, immersing you in its world from the start, placing you and your companions as its heroes. While you do have choices, the story is predetermined, making them minor in the grand scheme of things. You can level by using fates, which are zone-wide world quests that involve hunting monsters or assisting NPCs. Dungeons, instance zones where you fight in match parties or group with friends and clear the area of its boss threats. Trials, single boss encounters that require 4 to 8 person parties. Guildhests, which are 4-person party training exercises that test your combat knowledge up to level 50. Leaves, quests given to you by NPCs where you can raise the difficulty for more experience and better rewards. Deep dungeons, which create randomly generated floors where you can level up a character in the dungeon itself, solo or in group, and gain experience for the actual job every 10 floors cleared. You also get roulette missions that involve you taking on random dungeons, trials, and guildhests in your level range and getting bonus experience once daily per task. The core of leveling is based on following the main story quest, but you can do side quests as well. You can also gain EXP winning in PvP starting at level 30. Aside from the main story, the rest of the content can be done with friends. TERA Online was developed by Bluehost Studios, which faced a lawsuit by NCSoft in 2007 over former members now employed by Bluehost that were on the development team for another NCSoft MMO and taking company trade secrets over to Bluehost. And despite the attempted injunctions, En Masse Entertainment in May 2012 brought it to North America on PC and released it on consoles, PS4 and Xbox One in April 2018. TERA is a free-to-play game with optional subscription and cash shop for glamour and materials, action combat MMO, where you manually target, lock on, and attack the enemies. Most skills are on a tiered combo system with different combos you can go into depending on the skills needed, but not all skills need to be activated through combos, giving you the freedom to play reactionary. While TERA has a story, progression in the game is free reign, meaning you can level by story quests, side quests, winning PvP matches starting at level 20, and doing instance dungeons. You also have vanguards, which are daily missions that give you bonus rewards like tokens for equipment, materials, and gold for completing dungeons, solo hunts, and PvP. These can all be done solo or with friends. A pro is that with TERA, you can choose when you want to engage in the story and won't be locked out of content because of it, versus Final Fantasy XIV, where most of its content is locked behind story progression or side quests. Now, after you build yourself up and reach max level in each game respectively, most will tell you this is where the game truly begins. At Endgame, you can choose to test your skills as a raider in PvE content or as a combatant in PvP. Now because TERA came out on consoles and is several patches behind, I'm doing the comparison with both games in their most recent North American PC updates to make the comparisons as objective as I possibly can. And with that said, let's get into the categories of Endgame. So you've just reached max level, and the world that you thought was becoming so small has now opened up much wider. You're now in the realm of endgamers. You see all these players standing around the hubs and gear that makes yours look like you just brought it from a vendor. What do? The goal for both games is to raise your item level to gain access to the in-game content. Simply put, the higher your level, the more content you're able to do, and the better gear you receive. In Final Fantasy XIV, upon reaching max level on a job, you're given a quest that gives you a weapon and full set of body gear, excluding accessories. That is just enough to get you into high level dungeons. These are dungeons that are max level, offer no EXP, but they do give you gear in two types of tomes, an uncapped set and a weekly cap set that can be saved up for purchasing entry level raid gear and accessories. You are allowed to hunt monsters as well for seals daily and weekly, and that can be used to purchase gear or materials to upgrade gear as well. Now, upon reaching the required item level, you unlock EX dungeons, which gives you better gear, and EX trials that can give you weapons and accessories. And depending on the patch, if you're in an odd numbered one, you're given a 24-man alliance raid, which gives you a weekly piece of gear and materials to upgrade tome gear. It might seem overwhelming, but if you just do the content that's available, you will reach the proper item level to do entry level raids or normal raids. Now these raids drop gear and accessories based on RNG and random number generated system, or you pray to this guy and hope you get what you need to win the role. If you lose a role or your gear doesn't drop at all, don't worry, you can rerun the raid until you do. Then you will reach your weekly lockout once you obtain your item per raid. You also get tomes until you reach your weekly cap, and at the end of the weekly raid tier, you gain an item for a weapon which takes 7 weeks to earn. Yikes. Let's discuss some pros. If you took the time to level crafters, know friends, or have guild members that are crafters, or say even made a bit of guild on your own to purchase some, you can bypass this entry level process completely by obtaining crafted entry level raid gear and accessories so you don't have to wait. You can also use the dungeons, tomes, hunts, trials, alliance raids, and roulettes to help you reach the required item level. This gives you multiple ways to get stronger fast. Some cons are that if you're very casual and do not have the time or means for crafting or running content as much as you like, it can take you upwards of 2 weeks or more to gear up for the Savage Raid tier. In some hunts, namely the S ranks, you have to have information on their location and they cannot be soloed. If you are not with a hunt link shell, a chat group that relays hunts, or a solid group, you might not get full rewards or make it to the hunt on time at all. RNG can play a major role outside of uncapped tomes, crafting, and trial farming for accessories and weapons, which can be time consuming. A major con is that even with friends, you still might get groups that have difficulty or are unable to complete some content, causing a time sink if you have to disband or reset. And since weekly raids have a one piece of loot win then lock you out, you have to choose wisely and try to build as efficiently as possible if you want to reach the next tier of rating promptly. The final thing I want to touch on is that with one tome set having a weekly cap, it can take 1 to 2 weeks just to get a single piece of gear or an accessory, and it still takes you upwards of 7 weeks to get the weapon if you don't farm the primals or find another means to obtain a good weapon. With TERA, you can jump to the final chapters of the story where after completing a series of quests, you were given entry-level raid gear for the entry-level raids and dungeons. And now that you're geared, the goal is to farm the next tier of raid gear, which can be obtained by doing dungeons and raids that drop gear and accessories, then building the gear's item level up through enhancements by using feedstock, alkahest, spellbinds to get the best stats, and Masterwork scrolls. You can also obtain tokens for the gear, accessories, and needed materials, and you can also get them by doing solo endgame content. You can do the arena trials, the ace dungeons. They also reward you with medals based on performance and tokens and materials, the arcana dungeons, the drop gear, accessories, and materials, and the gilly glade, which gives tokens for gear and random materials. You can also do solo hunts that give tokens as well. Doing these automatically give you Vanguard rewards, which gives you bonus. The pro with TERA is that it gets you into raids faster by giving you the gear and weapons you need without too much hassle. You can also do 8 Vanguards a day before the rewards decrease, and you can do 16 weekly, which will give you gold and materials you need to upgrade and level your gear. Another plus is that during the dungeons, raids, and challenges, you can also get pieces of gear for alts, though most of it is bind on pickup. You can save up tokens and medals to earn the gear too, if you lack the RNG from your dungeons and raids. And you can also use PvP points as well, if you've done any as you leveled up and saved up enough points. A very good pro is that the raids give you a rookie status to help learn the fights easier. With the ability to self-res with some gold, you can worry less about wiping or boss resets, allowing you to power through some fights even if the situation gets dire. Now for the cons, dungeons and trials are limited per day. They do double with the elite status, but they are still limited, so you can't farm the dungeons without elite reset scrolls, which are also hard to come by. The biggest con is that RNG plays a major role in acquiring gear, so even after your vanguards and dungeon limits are up, you still may not have the gear that you were looking for. Another small con is that you can't open lock boxes without keys from the cash shop if you don't get rewarded them, gifted, or manage to get them from a broker. Otherwise, you can just sell the boxes for gold. On Final Fantasy XIV, after acquiring entry-level gear, you can now do EX dungeons and move on to Savage Mode raiding, which is the hardest mode before unlocking the Ultimate Content series. This raid tier has a weekly lockout upon clearing, giving you a chance at gear, accessories, and materials to upgrade the tone gear and accessories, and rewarding you with a token. Now this is where you obtain the best in slot or BIS rating gear until the next rating tier. A pro is that you can obtain all your gear through tokens in 8 weeks or less with good RNG, as the raid tier is meant to last 6 months. Also, mixing raiding with roulettes speeds the capping of tomes weekly and allows you to obtain and augment gear faster. A con is the weekly lockout on Savage raids. Whether you get your gear or not, and even though you do get a token, you might have to rely on those tokens for gear, which can take up to 8 weeks just to get a piece if you want. Another issue is that if you don't have a solid raid group or guild, you might not get all your weekly clears, and using pickup groups or pugs can be risky and time consuming, yielding little results. TERA's mid-level rating requires you to build your item level by farming the gear and materials to upgrade it to gain access to the next set of dungeons and raids. I'm going to start with the cons this time because it'll better help me explain the pros. For starters, the fact that you have limited runs daily make the RNG that much more prevalent. The gear can fail to upgrade, and using certain methods increases the chances after you fail, but you can still run out of materials due to the limited chances daily you have. A major con is that some stats on the gear may need to be raised, and it's random using spellbind materials, and depending on the tier, it can make the gear item level worse, and you can run out of mats trying to adjust them. The con with crafting is that it requires items to drop from the dungeons, and you will need artists and crafters from a couple of other professions to make the gear, and if you lack the guildmates, friends, or alt crafters, the market board will be very expensive to obtain materials from. And speaking of the market board, materials on there to upgrade your gear can be very expensive as well, especially items that are in demand like the feedstock and alcohol to upgrade. They can consume massive amounts of gold, and you can find yourself broke very quickly with little results. As far as PvP goes, without a solid group or the correct gear, it can be a very slow process to earn points to get gear and patterns that way. And if you don't have a good ratio, your chances of getting paired with a good team is that much more lower because you do have a rating. Now, the pros are that if you have alts, you can run dungeons and pool your gear to increase your chances of gearing at least one character and getting them into the next tier. This process bypasses the limitation placed on your character singularly, and the gear can only fail so many times before you reach a level up using the material method. You can hit a rough patch, but will eventually succeed. Also, once you max out your gear, you can sell the materials you don't need for a lot of gold on the broker. Now for the hard mode rating. Here the gloves come off. There is no forgiveness, and skill separates you from failure or success. This is where the games differ drastically in approach. For Final Fantasy XIV, the Ultimate series is locked behind the Savage content regardless of your item level. This raid is only for those who have proven themselves by completing the challenges before them. Item level isn't the case here so much as skill. Now the pros are, the rewards are the best in-game weapons, and these are good for getting into the next raid tier or leveling in a new expansion. These items can get you through a new raid floor or two before being replaced, or use to level a few levels or more in a new expansion, not needing to be immediately replaced. The title and rewards also put you among the elite on your server. A con is that this level of raiding requires teamwork and skill beyond the normal or savage tiers of raiding. These fights are penalizing and can be reset even if one mistake is made at the wrong time. The rewards are still weekly, so you will not be rewarded for your efforts again, which makes some people apprehensive about helping novices and strangers. This level is optional and will not affect your overall gameplay. There is no real in-game PvP to test your item level on either, because all of the PvP combat is instanced and synced for fairness, though each job has its own strengths and weaknesses. For TERA, the cycle continues with building up your gear and reaching the required item level by getting materials, drops, tokens, and now crafting patterns. The hard modes and raids are more challenging and give better gear and materials. A pro is that these raids still have rookie modes but are very limited with the forgiveness, so it's best to allow healers to raise you and try to use the self-reses for clutch situations. Now once you master these runs and max out the gear, you can sell the materials and patterns, making a fortune. You can still use PvP points to earn patterns as well. Actively participating in battlegrounds is also a good way to increase your chances of earning gear. Having the best gear here also gives you an advantage in PvP situations, giving you more survivability and damage output versus someone geared in a lower tier. These runs are still part of the Vanguard, giving you bonuses for completions as well. A con is that TERA's endgame still suffers from the limited daily runs and RNG for crafting patterns, materials, and loot drops. The grind repeats itself for the remainder of the endgame cycle. There are no alternate ways to gear for PvP. These gear sets are used for both PvE and PvP, meaning that an active raider will have an advantage over someone who is only on TERA for PvP, meaning you must play PvE if you want to avoid being fodder for raiders who excel at PvP as well. Another topic I want to discuss is Final Fantasy XIV's Materia and TERA's crystals and etching system. I bring this up separately because these are augments to the gear that have their own pros and cons, but do not affect the item levels or entries to raiding. Final Fantasy XIV's Materia allows you to strengthen the gear that have slots on them. Depending on the gear type, you can slot 1 to 5 materia into a piece of gear. The pro is of course materia makes you stronger, boosting some main and secondary stats. Materia can be earned from roulettes, dungeon drops, hunt seals, be fused together to create a new one, or brought from the auction house. If you have materia, you can sell it for good amounts of gil on the auction house as well. The cons are that depending on your gear, namely crafted gear, materia can fail if you go beyond the recommended slots, causing it to fail and shatter. This process can be timely and costly depending on the materia you are trying to install. And the more in demand the materia, the higher the price. TERA's crystals can be placed in the gear based on the class, level, and what stats you want for PvP and PvE. Crystals are earned through rewards, tokens, PvP points, or brought from a broker. They can also be fused to create a new or stronger type. Etchings can be earned through rewards or crafts, and they either enhance your gear for a set number of real-life days or permanently. Pros are that these boost your main and secondary stats, making you stronger. You can create really good crystals using fusion, or you can buy them from vendors if need be. Now the downside of this is that if you die, they can shatter without a crystal bind scroll on. This can be costly, especially if a powerful crystal that you can't find, repurchase, or reproduce is lost. The really good crystals are also costly, so you will want to protect them at all costs. And you will need crystal binds to protect them, which can be very costly on the broker if you can't afford to get good binds and you have to prog through content. And some etchings need materials that you can only get from dungeons to craft or buy them from the broker, and they can be very expensive if you aren't a crafter as well. Both games have endgame grind, but overall it comes down to preference and affordability. 14 is more finite than TERA, with RNG playing a major role whether you pay for a sub there or not, or you are willing to use a cash shop periodically. Also, TERA's in-game PvP benefits from PvE versus Final Fantasy XIV's, where the PvP gear is just used as glamour, and the PvE gear is only used to get more PvE gear, and that too eventually becomes glamour when outdated. The in-game rating difficulties for both games are subjective to the player, as they can both be penalizing and punishing for mistakes the higher you go. As far as fun, TERA's PvP is more connected with its endgame, while Final Fantasy XIV's PvP is more of a dedicated choice of pastime. But because 14's PvP is about balance, not item level, it has its own player base. And while it is possible to be strictly PvE on TERA, PvP only players can suffer against expedient raiders who play all the content. My personal verdict is that I find Final Fantasy XIV to be less grindy and time consuming than TERA. Even if you have good teams on both games, I do find TERA's PvP to be more engaging, but feel forced to PvE to keep up and avoid having a bad time against more dedicated players. Casually, Final Fantasy XIV has more to offer, but the sub and story driven plot to unlock the content may be a turn off to some. Having paid for subs for both games, Final Fantasy XIV gave me more bang for my buck. If you do plan to pay for a sub, 14 will offer you more during content lulls with more social and side events. Staying sub to 14 also has merits such as avoiding the loss of your house after 45 days and still getting veteran rewards. 14 players might want to mix it up with other games while testing out new jobs on 14, which can give the game a fresh perspective. With TERA console versions behind, players might want to approach it slowly, allowing the game to catch up to PC and mix it in with other games or trying other classes to keep it fresh. Though I lean towards Final Fantasy XIV monetarily, it doesn't mean I don't enjoy TERA. Both games can be enjoyed together or in succession if played moderately, as content patches for both games will give you breaks between the other's grind. This brings us to the end of the Endgame series of Final Fantasy XIV vs. TERA Online. We welcome your input and questions, so leave a comment in the comment section below and we'll keep the discussion going. If you enjoy the content and want to support it, like, share, and subscribe. You can follow us on social media. Links are in the YouTube channel description. And we'll try to get these going weekly or bi-weekly. Have a good day from all of us at AR. I'm Anima Arson, signing off.